In It Together SC and the Diabetes Action Council of South Carolina present Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday on Coping with Tre Tailor. Coping. Well, it's Alcohol Awareness Month, and Aaron White joins us. He is a senior scientific advisor to the NIAA and chief epidemiology and biometry branch at the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. Hey, Aaron, thank you again so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Hi, Trey. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Listen, want to remind everyone that if you want to post a comment, please do, and we will get it to our guest. So is alcoholism, Aaron, just simply misuse of alcohol, or is it something more?
It's something more. Essentially, we can measure it using a special instrument, a diagnostic instrument, something like what's called the DSM-5 criteria. But we can also just sort of describe it. And it makes sense when you just talk about what it is. It is essentially a loss of ability to regulate your drinking. And so it's not, you can't just have one and stop. Once you have one, you want to have two, and two leads to three, et cetera. And you may be able to string together a couple days, maybe even a month or so of drinking less than what you're drinking, but it's very hard for somebody to regulate that and keep it in check. Another critical part of it is not just the amount you drink, it's really how it impacts your life. And so if you're drinking and it's disrupting your relationships, if it's causing you problems with work, if you're losing friendships, if you injure yourself when you drink, but you keep doing it, then that suggests there's a problem. So it's difficulty regulating how much you drink, and it's difficulty regulating that even though alcohol is causing you problems in your life.
What are some of the causes of alcoholism? Because you say it's so much deeper than just misuse. It's almost like you're out of control.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, there's a couple things we know that are associated with a greater likelihood that you're going to have a problem. One is if somebody starts drinking when they're young.
Wow.
I mean, the brain is so flexible, so plastic. The brain will learn about anything you do that's rewarding. So if you do something that makes you feel good, or it takes away your anxiety, your brain's going to try to remember that to repeat it because it thinks it's important. Well, when we're young, the brain is built to learn. And so if you do something when you're young that gives you a blast of pleasure that's bigger than what you're normally getting, or it calms your anxiety or your worry more than something else, your brain's going to want to do that again.
Yeah.
So it thinks it's helping you, but in fact, you're setting yourself up for a problem. There's a genetic component too. We still don't understand, how the genes impact people, but it seems that if you have a family history of a problem with alcohol, there's about a 50% chance that you'll have a problem with alcohol, assuming you decide to drink. And so if people who drink when they're alone, if you're able to drink and socialize, that's less concerning than people who, for some reason, they're drawn to drinking by themselves. Basically, anytime you drink alcohol to cope with your life, cope with anxiety or worry, that puts you on a slippery slope to developing a problem.
That's so interesting. One thing I want to say, Blossom Rogers says Colt 45. I guess she's saying that was her drink of choice. Thank you, Blossom, so much for joining us. We actually interviewed her yesterday for a show later where she talks about how she started drinking early, and it became a problem for her. I mean, she ended up okay. But you said something that was fascinating to me, that the brain remembers what gives it pleasure, whether it's good or not. So the brain's not as smart as we think it is.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, but you're exactly right. I mean, the brain thinks it's the whole reason we have those systems in place that make you feel good is so that you can learn. Because the assumption is if you do something that gives you pleasure, it's probably good for your survival.
Right.
It's good food, or it's good company, or safety. Same thing with getting rid of feelings of discomfort. The brain assumes if you do something that makes you feel less scared, that it's good for you. You want to repeat that. We used to think that people like drugs primarily because they give people pleasure. And that's true. I mean, drugs by and large give people pleasure and people like that. But the real risk for developing problems is when people have difficult lives and they do a drug and they like it because they don't feel as bad for a little bit. And that's what we had completely wrong about how drugs work. And by the way, to foreshadow, that's a big part of the solution to the problem, is to help people find ways to cope and also not live such challenging lives, to have less friction in the world around them, less discrimination, less violence, less all of that. And so it's not just about pleasure. We had that part wrong about drugs.
Yeah. So interesting because, again, you say that the key to curing alcoholism, if that is the correct term, is to help people live better lives so they don't have to turn to alcoholism. And they turn to it thinking that it is going to make them feel better when it actually makes everything worse.
And for a little while, it does make people feel better.
Yeah.
That's the tricky part about it. It is literally a trap in a way, that for a little while it helps until it doesn't.
Until it
and
doesn't.
then eventually it makes things worse. And in fact, the way the brain works, initially you get that reduction in anxiety when you drink, but the brain adjusts to that so that over time you don't get as much reduction in anxiety. And now when you're not drinking, you have more anxiety.
Right.
And so it is, again, it's these systems are there to help us survive. But when it comes to alcohol, they work against us. They trick us into thinking we're doing something good. And then we end up worse off than when we started.
Aaron White is with the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. It is Alcohol Awareness Month, and you're watching Wellness Wednesday on from In It Together SC and the Diabetes Action Council. I'm Tre Tailor, and you're watching Coping with COVID. So what are some of the signs, Aaron? What can we look for in ourselves and in others to recognize they are alcoholic or are having problems with alcoholism?
Well, in ourselves, I think the kinds of things that we can look at are we thinking about alcohol when we're not drinking it? Are we looking forward to the next time we drink? Now, some of that is not necessarily unhealthy. People like to have a glass of wine, and they don't necessarily have to have a problem to look forward to that. But if you're going through your day and you can't wait to get home and put the kids to bed so that you can get drunk to cope with how you feel, I mean, that is a red flag. What we talk about is looking at your relationship with alcohol. Why do you drink? When do you drink? How much do you drink? What happens when you drink? For each person, that's going to look a little different. But if you're drinking to cope, and particularly if you don't feel good without it, if in between glasses of wine, if you had to go a night without drinking, most people think, oh, that's not a big deal. But if you happen to be somebody who doesn't like that thought, I'm going to go visit somebody and I'm worried they might not have alcohol at their house. It's all about looking at your own relationship with it, why you're drinking, etc. Again, it's going to look a little different for each person, but some of the warning signs are basically you feel anxious or restless or have insomnia without it. If that's the case, then you know that you've exposed your brain to enough alcohol that you've become dependent on it, that you need it to function. If every time you are upset, the first thing you want to do is grab a bottle of something, you might not have a problem at that moment, but you should really consider your relationship with alcohol.
Right. Blossom Rogers, who we heard from earlier, said she started at age 5. That's right. I forgot. She did tell me that, Aaron. She told me that. And this is something that a lot of families used to do when she wasn't feeling well. Her grandmother would make up a concoction that included alcohol and say, go get your medicine,
Oh, yeah, that's not good. At that young age, I mean, how quickly we learn. And I will say that's another aspect of it too. If you grow up in a home where there's a lot of alcohol use, even if your relatives don't have problems with alcohol, if they just like to drink, and so you see them getting excited about the drinking and drinking every time they socialize, even if we don't have an addiction, we're sending a message to our kids that this is how you have fun, this is how you have cope, this is how you cope, this is normal. And I don't want to demonize alcohol. I'm certainly not somebody who wants everybody to stop drinking alcohol. It just can become a problem, and we have to be careful about our own drinking, but also how we model that for other kids. So for instance, a child who grows up in a home where at least one of the caregivers has an alcohol addiction, alcohol use disorder, what we used to call alcoholism, they're 4 times more likely to have an alcohol use disorder themselves. 4 times. Maybe because of the genes, maybe because of the modeling, maybe because they're allowed to drink at a younger age. There's all kinds of factors, but we really have to be careful about the messages we send kids.
Yeah. And you know what? I tell you, I'm more conscientious about that now because I am into my second parenthood with I have a 6 and a 3-year, almost 4-year-old, and I am much more conscientious about what I say, what I do, even
Mhm.
just, just reacting to the craziness that is having kids, because they are magnets and they are little mimickers. You
Mhm.
don't even recognize that
Yeah.
they are conscientious about things that you don't even recognize that you might be doing or saying.
You're exactly right. And sometimes it's the attitudes that we help them establish at a young age. So for instance, at the age of 6, if a child has a positive attitude about alcohol, what we call expectancies or expectations, you follow those kids, 10 years later, they're more likely to be drinking
Mm.
heavily, et cetera. So even at a young age, we formulate, like you said, you don't even have to, you don't even have to see the wheels turning in their heads. Their
Yeah.
brains are recording. It's supposed to be part of survival. They see us do something that we like, and their brains learn this is good for you.
Right.
And so, I hear this all the time from people that, well, alcohol is good for me. I have fun. It's relaxing. It can be part of a healthy lifestyle, no
Yeah.
question about it. I mean, there's
Yeah.
all kinds of things that we do that ultimately aren't something you want to do every day. I like to eat, Five Guys burgers and fries down the road for me. I can't do that every day, but it's okay to do that sometimes.
Right.
And so, it's not that people shouldn't do it. It's just that we have to be careful about the messages it sends, particularly to our little ones whose brains are always paying attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Danielle Lake she says that's the very reason that she doesn't drink. She said she saw how alcohol destroyed 3 family members, her
Mm,
aunt, her uncle, and her cousin. Hey, Danielle, thank you so much.
thank you.
Yeah, for me too. I mean, I grew up in a household that everybody drank, and I, I'll drink an occasional glass of wine, but it took me a
Mm,
long time to start drinking as a teenager, as a young
mhm,
adult, because I saw the chaos it brought my family.
mhm,
So, and like you said, it could go either way. You could go that way or you could not go that way, just depending on how
mhm.
you I guess how you were raised or just how you react to your environment.
Exactly. And I mean, the one thing that we know is that if we if we really want to help our kids have a healthy relationship with alcohol, if we think that alcohol should be part of a lifestyle, we want it to be part of our kids' lifestyles when they grow up, the best thing we can do is help them avoid it until their brains are done, and model healthy behavior.
Yeah.
And
Blossom Rod I'm sorry, Aaron. Blossom had another question. Blossom, we're going to get to your question in a minute, but I wanted to bring up the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism posted something, Aaron. It says you can
mhm,
learn more about the signs and symptoms of alcohol use disorder at
mhm.
uh, at the website. And Charity, if we could bring that website up, that would be great. So thank you so much for giving that information. We are talking to Aaron White. He's with the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. It's Alcohol Awareness Month, and we've been talking about the signs, the symptoms, and this show is sponsored by In It Together SC and the Diabetes